What's up, everybody? This is the Ike Inspirations podcast, and today I have a great guest named Dr. Lennox. Dr. Lennox is a psychologist, he's a dream expert, and he's also an astrologer. So, I'm excited to have him on and discuss the topic about the unconscious mind and how the unconscious mind affects our behavior and our day to day life. So, Dr. Lennox, can you please introduce yourself to the audience and uh, just share your story and what you're doing?
That's dangerous. I have vocal inertia. You put a quarter in, I might talk for the whole hour. So I'm Dr. Michael Lennox. Call me Michael. I call myself a spiritual teacher as the
Yeah.
top line. But yes, I'm a psychologist. So I have a doctorate in psychology. I'm an astrologer, and I'm an expert on dreams and dream interpretation. And while
Mm.
it was important to me, like in my 30s, to create the life that I'm leading now. Like I worked in the entertainment industry on the business side of things. I was doing dream workshops in my 20s in like yoga studios, but I needed to shift my life so that I could do what I love to do full time. So I got a doctorate when I was in my 30s, but I started interpreting dreams as a teenager.
Mm.
You know, kids in school, just like people in offices, will stand around and go, I had the craziest dream last night.
Yeah.
And because I had read Freud's interpretation of dreams at 15, I mean, I don't know how much I got at 15 reading it, but I certainly understood that dreams were powerful, they were valuable, they were hidden, and you could glean some important information about things you didn't know about yourself by virtue of paying attention to your dreams. And so that was natural for me to then try that out.
Yeah.
Just like I bought my first tarot deck at like 16 years old because knew I was intuitive and I wanted to explore that. So all of this interest in the unconscious and dreams and mysticism really started when I was like 15, 16 years old.
Yeah, awesome. And I've been having a lot of dream experts on. I guess it's just the timing of when everyone is agreeing to hop on the podcast, and I've been learning a lot about dreams and how it affects our lives. And it's very fascinating for sure. And for me, I feel like there's a relationship between dreams and the concept called like self-actualization, which I believe you're familiar with,
Oh, yes.
and it's something I'm very interested in. For those who don't know, self-actualization is essentially the process of reaching your full potential. And so, in life, there's so many directions you can head in. You can be a real estate investor. You can be a psychologist. You could be an astrologer. You could be an NFL player. And for me, I'm trying to just understand the best direction for myself. So, what does the process of self-actualization look like for you, Michael?
Well, the idea of becoming your full self includes having to take a look at aspects of yourself that you are not fan of. There are parts of us that we don't like. In depth psychology, which is Jung's sort of branch of psychology, he would call this the disowned self. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's parts of us that we wish weren't true, so we disown it. And this is where what we call shadow work begins, right? Shadow work just means that when you're triggered by something that happens in the world or an interaction with somebody else, rather than looking at the impetus and going into blame, like, I'm feeling some way, it's your fault. In shadow work, we say, no, you're not the cause of this. It's in me. Let's take a look. And so we investigate things that we might otherwise not want to investigate. And it's kind of like taking the ugly parts of us out of the closet that they're in, loving on them a little bit. And then that aspect of self gets incorporated into your conscious awareness self. So the person who has explored their fears, their angers, their griefs, their wounds, their childhood stuff, that person has got more room on the inside of them because the shitty vibes and the lousy thought patterns and wounds that we have take up space in our inner experience. So
Mm-hmm.
we investigate the things that are challenging inside of us and we become more actualized. And the reasons
Mm-hmm.
why I love dreams so much is that in dreams, we are doing this shadow work without even knowing that we're doing it. Here's how
Mm.
this works. We remember our scary dreams the most easily. Why would that be? I think it's because dreams that reflect to us where we are afraid or limited or challenged or feeling unworthy are valuable dreams. And so we remember them more. I like to
Yeah.
say, your yes doesn't need any help.
Yeah.
Certainly not for me. But your no does, because when we say no to life, we stop the flow. Dreams often take us into those landscapes through symbolism and
Yeah.
crazy imagery. We get to experience the fear, the unworthiness, the grief, the challenge. And by virtue of waking up the next day, having processed our unconscious at night, we are more self-actualized on a Tuesday than we were on a Monday. But here's the thing, Ike. If you participate in the process, by being interested in your dreams, maybe writing
Mm-hmm.
them down, allowing them to have a life inside of you beyond the moment when they come, you're participating with the process of your own self investigation and expansion by working with the mechanism that's right inside of you that's helping you do this every night when you go to sleep, even if you're
I
not paying attention.
I literally like had like everything you're saying about like working on your dreams and learning about your dreams and participating about your dreams. I literally had like a full blown experience of this, and I'll share a dream I
Yeah.
recently had. For the sake of repetition, I don't want to get too deep into it because I've had a lot of dream experts on, and we kept talking about it, and it's great. It's fascinating, and I love it. But essentially, the name of the dream is called the 3 year flying old the 3 year old flying baby. And essentially in the dream, Michael, I'm in a crowd of adults, and it's like we're in like a circus like environment, Michael, and I'm up looking above a flying baby that looks like Stewie Griffin. Do you know Family
I
Guy?
love it. Yep.
Yeah, looks like
Yes.
Stewie Griffin, like an
Dying. Yes.
evil, sinister, but like very powerful, like presence. And we're all looking at that baby, including me, and he's just flapping around. And I'm just like, wow, that baby looks so powerful. And I'm like, I wonder how I could be like that baby. And that was essentially what the dream was. It was me looking up at that baby, and I'm like, and everyone, including myself, is in awe of how powerful he is. But the baby had like an evil energy to him, like Stewie. Like you know how
Absolutely.
Stewie is incredibly
Who is a
powerful.
perfect avatar for this. So let me
Yeah,
ask you, like, when did you have the dream?
yeah. I had this dream about a week ago.
Oh, so it's recent.
Yeah.
So what were you starting up in your life, in your consciousness, and in your self-actualization journey 3 years ago?
Yeah. Wait, 3 years ago
Three
or
years ago.
oh, okay, that's interesting. What was I like thinking about 3 years ago? Yeah, so 3 years ago, that's interesting. 3 years ago, I was not in Atlanta. I was in Philadelphia, and I was preparing myself to move to Atlanta. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So the reason I ask is
yeah,
because when you have a dream and the figure has a very specific age,
yeah,
and it's young, I
yeah.
like to think of the symbol as representing something that's inside your psyche
Mm,
that's about 3 years old. Because remember, it's your dream. This
yeah,
Dewey is not dreaming about you, Ike,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So this idea of a part of you that can soar, that can fly,
yeah,
um, is maybe something that rose up as you were moving from one place to another. And what I love about it being Stewie is that even though he has a kind of cynical darkness to him,
yeah,
he's the smartest person
yeah,
in that environment. He's
yeah.
the most reasonable. He's got solution consciousness, and he
Yes,
doesn't fucking suffer fools.
yeah,
That to me is a good avatar for
yeah,
something to aspire to, because we don't want you to be flying up there with just your like lovely baby Buddha
Yeah.
stuff, because where's the shadow? Where's
Yeah.
the darkness? Where's the fear of death? Where's the
Yeah.
passion? Stewie represents the affirmative and the shadow both, which I love.
Yeah. No, and so, after writing that dream, every time I write a dream, I write the feeling of the dream. And for me, the feeling was wisdom leading to growth. And for me, I felt like you said, like the Stewie's very powerful. He's very wise and he's very smart. But uh we talk about shadow work and I guess the parts of us that we are innermost fear. There was like a tricky, sinister vibe towards the dream, almost like even though we want to be like Stewie, there's some type of evilness that I don't want to inherit about his power. It's kind of weird,
But there
yeah.
you have it. I mean, I don't know what that version would be for you,
Yeah.
like an evil aspect to sitting in a chair like you do. But I
Yeah.
certainly thought about this a lot because I hold people's psyche in my care while they're doing some really deep work.
Yeah.
And I know what it's like as a young performer. All I ever wanted
Yeah.
to do was be an actor when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I have it in me to enjoy attention and accolade. And what I
Yeah.
say to other burgeoning spiritual teachers a lot, especially if they're young, it's like you must learn how to receive the projection
Yeah.
of people thinking you're amazing,
Yeah.
because they will, and you rob them of the experience of teaching them if you fuck with that projection. You must allow people to revere you. But
Yeah.
if you only allow that, then you're in your narcissism, in your manipulation, and
Mm.
seeking the validation. And there are many, many spiritual teachers that are doing this. Because this lived in me, it was important from the get-go. Talk about self-actualization.
Yeah.
I had to get to a place where I wasn't bringing any of my wound into the room when I was teaching, so that I wouldn't ever be seduced by the attention and the projection. But the
Mm.
reason why I'm bringing this up is that
No. Mhm.
part of the darkness, it's probably because we're having this conversation and you have a
Yeah.
podcast and I have a podcast, that
Yeah.
I'm seeing this 3-year-old sort of introduction to that which is aspirational but also dark. Then I'm going to
Mhm.
say some of the darkness is, for the purpose of this conversation, about moving to a bigger chapter in your life and not bringing your evilness, manipulation,
Yeah.
and darkness to the new life. And
Yeah.
then if you had a feeling, you must never diminish that, right? Your feeling about the dream is more important than
Of
anything I'm going to
course.
say,
Of course.
right?
No, and as you're speaking, a lot of what you were saying actually is interesting, was similar to the conversations I've had with myself and with other dream experts. But interestingly is that you came to that conclusion before I even really said anything. The other people asked me questions to guide me towards that. So, which is interesting, and I have no where I don't really care as long as the answer's there and
Well,
clear.
I mean,
But
I'd love to actually share with you something that is
yeah,
interesting about what I do and what I bumped into when I was in grad school, where
mm-hmm.
I was told we were trained. All therapists are trained. You don't mess with a person's dream. You never tell them what it means,
Yeah,
ever. You hold it. You ask questions. And you never. I have a gift. I am not abandoning my gift because
yeah,
therapists shouldn't do that. In fact, at least 5 times in grad school, someone would say to me, "Oh, you shouldn't interpret. We're trained not to interpret dreams," and I would say, "Yeah, you shouldn't,
yeah.
but I should, because I have a gift." And the
Mm,
gift allows me to hear the story that you're telling. And
mm-hmm.
while I'm hearing it, I'm concocting the same story, but symbolically.
Yeah,
Circus environment. That's life. That's the
yeah,
chaos of life. So then I know in the dream you're thinking about aspects of you as you move through the
Yeah.
chaotic life of the world that sometimes feels like a circus.
Wow.
Not only were you looking, but everybody was looking, which means,
Yeah.
remember, it's not their dream.
Yeah.
All of those people looking up, they're thoughts that you're having.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this big congruency of all of your thoughts right now saying, I want to fly.
Yeah.
Right. And then your feeling about it is the one that says, but also look at the shadow. Make sure that you're living cleanly so you don't attract the darker energy that the dream
Yeah.
might have been reflecting.
You know, it's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, by the way, literally everything you're saying is like 100% correct. It's just interesting to me that it took me like an hour of like deep journaling, literally a full-blown podcast conversation that literally just flowed into my dream to understand that. But you seem to just have unpacked that without even knowing me, like in
Yes.
a couple minutes. And so for me, it kind of begs the question, like is dream interpretation like a valid skill? Because before this conversation I was always skeptical about that, because I feel like dreams are so personalized
Yep.
towards another
Yep.
person.
Yep.
It's like, who are you to say what my dream is, or you don't understand the full context of my life?
Correct. And you're absolutely accurate. Right.
Yeah.
That dreams are sacred. They happen inside a person. And, the answer to whether or not that's okay to do depends on who you ask.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So lots of people would say, oh, no, don't go anywhere near a dream, but you do the dream work. And as we've sort of said, therapists are trained to make sure that they're never invading.
Yeah.
And I still have to honor how I work. Now, I don't do psychotherapy, right? I'm not sitting in a psychotherapist's room. People come to me because they want that gift that you just saw in action.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And indeed, other people should not try to do what I can do because it's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I'm also trained and I know like the rules about this, I'm very comfortable having the conversation of, yes, the dream is sacred. It's yours. And I have a gift. If it's right for my gift to be in your world, you will find me.
Mm.
And then it's the right interpretation. Because you found me.
Yeah.
I have a story about this.
Please.
I was going to an event later that day, social, where I was going to see several friends, including a friend of mine who's an avid dreamer.
Yeah.
She texted me, wild, uncomfortable dream. Are you going today? I said, yes, I'll see you there. I'll be happy to interpret your dream. Meanwhile, she goes to an online dream dictionary site. Yeah. Her dream involves a skunk.
Okay.
Somewhere a dream site said that the skunk symbolism had to do with like sexuality. Now, I wouldn't say that about skunk ever, because the meaning, the universal meaning you ascribe to anything, but certainly an animal, has to relate to what the animal does, how it behaves, what we all think of skunks. Now, I don't know about you, Ike, but I don't look at skunk and think, I want to have sex.
No.
What do skunks do? They express fear with this very large, sort of off-putting smell. So to me, the skunk medicine is about fear and keeping others at bay. So now I'm sitting with her at this event. The dream does indeed talk of her sexuality because of other symbols. I can't join her with the skunk and sexuality, but I can't rip it from her because remember, her psyche led her to that dream dictionary that said sexual. So I then have to incorporate that. And then suddenly I'm talking about sexual shame. And she's like, oh my God, that is, like it hit her powerfully in a way that I don't know that I would have said had she not told me. I looked up skunk and it said sexuality. I had to honor that because who am I to say, well, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah. So you use your gift of dream interpretation and incorporate that skill set into other people's
Other things that I
experiences
do,
and
yes.
psyche. So it's combined and it's not just dismissive of other people's feelings, which I think is super valid. And I shared my dream with you, Dr. Lennox, and that was definitely I don't know if I could say perhaps for me personally the most impactful dream I've had, even though I've had a lot of dreams, but that dream really spoke to my psyche and like I think the deep core of who I am as a human being and a leader in this world. I'm curious for you, Dr. Lennox, Michael. I don't want to, Michael. For you, Michael, what was the most impactful dream you ever had, and how did it shape your life?
Well, I mean, I'd have to say the most impactful one was something that I wouldn't necessarily characterize as a um, dream, but more of a
Okay.
dream experience.
Okay.
Um, so there's a thing that happens before and or after the sleep cycle for people sometimes where the paralysis that the brain drops on the body doesn't lift, but the consciousness begins to awaken. And
Mm-hmm.
that person is called a night terror. Fancy words, hypnagogic hallucination. And the experience is we're dreaming that we're lying in bed and we can't move. We might dream that something is sitting on our chest. It's
Yeah.
terrifying. I had one of those, but
Mm.
then it led to something else. Now, this happened to be the morning that Princess Diana was murdered.
Mm.
So the force had been ripped apart. There was a break in the force that day. Like the world
Mm.
was just finding this out while I was sleeping in bed in Los
Yeah,
Angeles.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I go into this hypnagogic hallucination of dreaming that I can't move. And then I go into this experience where I'm on like a lake. It's very
Mm.
misty and pretty. It's very like Mists of Avalon, very um beautiful. And I'm sitting in this boat with a just gorgeous woman, kind of goddessy in her dress, very sort of soft visage. And she says to me, I'm so sorry, but this is the only time that you and I are ever going to be able to sit together. But I wanted to connect with you and I wanted to let you know that I'm here.
Mm.
Like, okay. Now, I didn't know what to do with this until much later in my journey when I started to explore the guides that I relate to on the intuitive level. And one of them, the most important one, is a feminine guide that I call Mother, who's the top of the pyramid of my inner guidance, but she has almost no strength or vibration. That's why she said, I can't see you. I can't reveal myself to you. I think she used the rip and tear in the fabric of consciousness that moment to sort of enter in and say, hey, I'm here. And then 15 years later, I'm like, oh my God, that's that energy that I feel in this way.
Mm.
And it came, I think, not only because it came in a dream, but because I know what hypnagogic hallucinations are, I didn't try to wake myself up. I wasn't frightened of the first part. A lot of people have
Mm.
that dream and they're
Yeah,
like, I gotta move so I can wake up.
yeah,
But I didn't. I went
mm,
sort of like in, I
yeah,
relaxed into it.
yeah. No resistance.
No resistance.
Interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of practical people who may be watching this may kind of resist this or and think, "What the hell are you talking about?" It
Sure.
sounds like really woo woo, and might be even judgmental or skeptical. Now, I too, I think my younger self would have felt the same way about conversations like this until I've started having similar experience. You mentioned Princess Princess Diane and her death. This I have a similar experience, but it wasn't necessarily a dream. It was like in waking life. But I'll give you the context, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about
Sure.
this. But there's this famous rapper named King Von. I don't know if you know who he is,
No,
but
no,
he
I've heard of
recently,
it.
yeah,
I've
but
heard
in the black community, he's very popular, and he recently passed away.
of it.
And this was about 2 years ago. I have never listened. I'm a DJ and a music lover. I love music. I listen to a lot of albums, and I kid you not, I don't really listen to his type of music. It's not my type of vibe. But on the day that he died, before he died, I don't know who he is. I have no context to who he is. I just happened to listen to his album like before he died, and I was listening to a King Von album, and I was like, okay, cool. 3 tracks, and this usually never happens to me. 3 tracks into the album, I'm like, this is really weird. I'm getting this weird feeling. I'm getting this really, really weird feeling. I don't even know who he is. I immediately stopped listening to the album, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I did not feel okay, and I just stopped listening to the album. Literally, after I stopped listening to the album, 2 hours later, he's reported dead. It was the weirdest thing, and I know this sounds spooky, whatever. I listened. I have a lot of artists, rappers. I listen to albums all the time. That never happens. I just like I would enjoy the music, or even if I don't like the song, I might not be present and whatever. But like I don't just stop listening to the album. I was feeling like I was like, I don't know what's going on. I feel really weird. I didn't even, and then 2 hours later, I figured he's just dead. And I'm like, what the hell just happened, bro? Like, I'm curious. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would call that a living dream.
Yeah.
Right. Or a waking dream.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that people first wake up to understanding that there's more to this experience than meets the eye is through synchronicities, right? Synchronicities are the simultaneous experience of two unrelated events that seem completely related because of their simultaneity.
Yeah.
Jung was the person who first coined the term, and how he came up with the term was he was sitting in a consultation with a client talking about a dream of a scarab beetle. And there was this rapping sound at the window, and it kept invading their conversation. They got up to explore it. It was a scarab beetle. So he's like, oh, this shit happens all the time. Let's call it something. So the way most people experience synchronicities easily is in the world of numbers. This is where you see the clock and it's always 222 or 333 or 444. Now listen, you're looking at your clock all day long, but when you look at it with a fancy number, you register it. But it's still a synchronicity, meaning there's something to the idea of the simultaneity.
Yeah.
The way to hold a synchronicity so that you get the value out of it is to think of it as having all meaning and no meaning. Both. You can't go with all meaning, otherwise it's magical thinking, and it's you're a magician and you have a connection to King Von and you predicted his death, and that's like bullshit.
No.
But if you dismiss it, you're missing out on one of the richest experiences of being a human in a body, which is that this conscious awareness is about this much of who we are, and in the spread of our unconscious capacity to understand life, things come through us in moments like this, which I think are designed to get your attention in a synchronicity kind of way. And this is not like it's 444 again. This is like 15 out of 10.
Yeah.
Hopefully reminding you that your best explorations in life are going to be about the whole picture, what's available above the surface and what's happening below.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. And I am very familiar with the concept of synchronicity, and it's a very interesting concept that was introduced by Carl Jung, and I see it a lot of times in my life, but sometimes the logical mind in me just wants to dismiss it. But it's a weird thing when it happens often, and then I hear stories like yours. I have experiences like that King Von story that seems to keep aligning. It's almost too hard to ignore, and it seems like there's some type of something happening, but I also don't want to get into the habit of just ascribing meaning to everything instead of letting it just be what it is.
Correct. Because that will lead you down a path of nonsense. Like there's nothing down there. Magical thinking. But if you dismiss it, you're missing out on something that's not visible. So people who dismiss the woo-woo mostly are dismissing something because they can't see it. Because it's not rational and logical. But the yummiest things in life are not rational and logical.
Well, I mean, I love Carl Jung, and as we talk about, you talk about seeing by like faith. I'm also a Christian too, and in a popular verses, we walk by faith, not by sight. And I'm not quite sure how the two align, but it's got me thinking, like, the power of having faith. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Synchronicity, God, do you find alignment in it, or do you I'm curious.
God, I mean, first of all, I like to use the word God because it makes sense to me. But when I use the word God, there's nothing in the world of religion that would resemble what I'm talking about when I use that word. When I use that word, I'm talking about the idea that the universe that invented us and the force that is in us. When Jesus came along, he said, the Father is within. God is within. That message got a little twisted along the way over the 2,000 years. But the idea that we are all an aspect of the divine,
Yeah.
and the collective consciousness of all of the beings on the planet is a reflection of the universe that invented us, which I call God. And
Yeah.
so, as such, I want to live as if that were true and accurate. So, what does that mean for me? That means that I cultivate behaviors in my life that remind my body that I'm more connected to something bigger, because my mind is going to tell me I'm separate.
Yeah.
So, I've taught my mind to shut the fuck up. Right? You're not needed here. The
Yeah.
mind is best to do things like tell you to put on a sweater because it got
Yeah.
cold.
Yeah.
Look both ways before you cross the street.
Yeah.
But the mind is never telling you anything of value.
Yeah.
But the unconscious is surrounding us with the energy of flow, and life follows that flow. And one of the worst things you can do to stop that flow is to think about it too much.
Yeah. So I believe in the concept of the Trinity of there being mind, body, and spirit.
Beautiful.
And I personally believe that we were all given a body that I personally believe the world gives way too much attention to. And we were also given a spirit that I feel like the world doesn't pay enough attention to. And I feel
the
like
mind is what leads.
Yeah, and the mind is what leads. Exactly. And so we seem to be in agreement in that thing. And I feel like, for example, with that King Von story or with your dream, I feel like there was some type of spiritual thing happening. I don't quite understand
100%. And
but-
I wouldn't doubt it for a second. And so part of what I want to do to reflect back to you is to speak to the part of you that doesn't doubt it.
Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think with the spirit and whatnot, conversations like these and podcasts like these, I think puts a lot more attention on that, and I think it places a lot more importance on that, because I also understand, just like you talk about following your intuition with Carl Jung, I don't want to get too religious. The Christianity's called the Holy Spirit. Spiritual people call it. To me, it's all the same thing. But like
all the same thing. There's only one path to God.
It's all the same thing.
All paths are the same.
It's all the same thing. But when you use your intuition, your Holy Spirit, whatever, like I've noticed that is where it leads to the greatest sense of happiness and fulfillment for me. You know what I'm saying? This podcast, honestly, from a practical standpoint, doesn't really make sense. It probably averages 50 to 100 views an episode. I'm not making money. If anything, I'm losing money. But from a fulfillment standpoint, it makes all the sense. And I feel like I'm being myself more than in any platform I've ever created, and I think that's just one example, but I think there's so many examples where following our intuition may not really make sense to the world or to the mind, but it makes all the sense to our spirit.
Absolutely. And if you follow your heart in that way, then you create a life that is, attractive and powerful. When I've been an astrologer for 30 years, so a long time.
Yeah.
There was a time when, as a teacher of astrology, because I have a whole school where people can learn how to read their charts and do other things in the world of astrology, I had a fantasy, because I had been a business guy in the entertainment industry, and I knew, how to do things in a marketing and business way that a lot of people who do what I do spiritually don't know how to do. And I thought, I'm going to take on the world of teaching astrology, and I'm going to be that famous, rich astrology teacher. But then every meeting I had with a marketing and SEO person was like, here's what you do.
Yeah.
Every time there's a big world event, you do the chart of that person, like Will Smith's chart when he hit Chris Rock. It was like, oh, and now I see these pop astrologers out there who speak fear and, everyone's going to meet their soulmate this month. It's like, that ain't gonna fucking happen, right? But I do the astrology that I love, And
Yeah.
I have my, 60,000 followers, not the million that chick
Yeah.
that I'm thinking of right now on TikTok has.
Yeah.
But it became way more important to me to love what I do, to feel the
Mm.
integrity of my gifts, and to
Yeah.
be of service as a demand on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
talking about the Kardashians' astrology is never going to lead to that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love to hear your story of integrity. It seems to be a constant theme with the people I have on my podcast.
Right.
And I'm glad that essentially like you didn't sell your soul to essentially speak falsehood and and kind of, because a lot of people can be easily influenced, and I think when we talk about stories like that from these pop astrologers, that is again, I think it's just a grasp of attention or trying to
Yes,
make
and
themselves
if
seem
you're doing
interesting.
it and you're getting lots of likes and lots of views and lots of followers, and you're like, well, I'll keep doing this. And now you're somebody who's saying bullshitty things because
Yeah.
people respond. People are going to respond to everyone's going to meet their soulmate in March, and nobody wants to hear from me that like it's all falling apart. Actually, I'm a very hopeful astrologer,
Well,
okay?
you know what?
Not a fear mongerer.
This would be, yeah. It would. Yeah, yeah. All right. Yeah. It's. Yeah. There's a lot of BS out there, and it's already hard enough to decipher who's telling the truth and who's not. And in terms of that, one thing I will be honest, and I actually did want to talk to you about this because I am skeptical about astrology, but I am open minded. I'm not someone who's just gonna shut off my beliefs about everything because I believe that's how you not grow. But when it comes to dreams, I'm a believer that I believe in psychedelics and the power of it. Astrology has always been something that has never really resonated with me, and I'm curious to you. I know you're active in it. Why is it so powerful for you? Why are you so active in that?
Let me tell you first what you think is astrology
Yeah.
based on what the media and the world tells you what astrology is about 1/16 of astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So part of why it would be difficult to be like, well, I don't know that I get that or buy it.
Yeah.
Dreams, I do. I have them and I get the
Yes.
experience. Psychedelics work because I
I
play
have
with them
them.
and I expand my
Exactly.
mind. And then when some chick says you're going to meet your soulmate in March, you're like, well, astrology must be bullshit. But you
Exactly. Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
you're not being exposed to real astrology.
Mm.
So, like, I'm a one person empirical anecdotal study of the truth of astrology because I have seen thousands and thousands of people over the last 30 years where I'd be like, what happened in May? I think something happened in your relationship life. And then she starts to cry because she broke up in May.
Yeah.
It's like, someone will say, well, my father might be ill and passing. And I'm like, yeah, probably October. And then the next year they come back and it's like, yep, October, because there's a reflection of the movement of the system and each of our individualized experiences of it.
Mm.
Now, if I told you that the Earth is aware of her relationship with the other planets geometrically, you might buy that because it's a planet to a planet. What a lot of people will say is, well, Mercury's so far away, how could it really be impacting us?
Yeah.
Which makes sense, like in 3D Earth terms, like the nearest transforming station isn't near me, so I'm not near that energy. Would it impact me?
Yeah.
Planet's so far away, except that the planet and us are not separate.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one thing happening here, and
Mm-hmm.
that's physical as well as spiritual and energetic.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
every planet that we have, with the exception of Chiron, who was grabbed in from outer space, was formed in a disk that was one sort of unit of energy around the sun. And so that as the planets coalesced, that changed from a visual perspective of one disk into these objects that seem separate. But it's still one mechanism moving through space.
Okay. So I want to. I want to explain my skepticism for
Sure.
you, and one reason, and you did nail it. Social media is a huge reason why I become skeptical because
Yeah,
I look at the
absolutely.
type of people
Talk about it all
who
the
are
time.
into it, and you get all types of bizarre predictions. But then I guess part of it is also the practical side of me, where when we talk about being a Gemini, I was born on June 17th, so that I believe that makes me a Gemini, and my mom was born on June 20th. And I love my mom, like, what I'm saying. I think that makes her a Gemini as well. But we are nothing alike in terms of
Right.
our personality. And I'm not. There's nothing wrong. I still love my mom, like,
Right.
but she. We don't. There's not much difference. And then you start to. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you're Gemini. Like, this is how you behave." And then my mom doesn't act like that. I'm like, what's going on? And I get confused. You know
Because
what I'm
that's not at
saying?
all how astrology works.
Yeah.
And you've got all of these people out there talking about who you should date
Yeah.
based on sun sign, which is crap. First of all, within charts, you don't just have a sun sign, you have a moon sign and a Mars and a Mercury and a Venus. So your mom and you don't relate to each other just because you both have a Gemini sun. That
Yeah.
does mean that you both contextualize who you are through words and ideas and communicating and talking. You talk a lot, she probably talks a lot, and that's where it ends.
Yeah.
Her moon might be rubbing up against your moon, and that means that there's like unconscious ways that you have challenges. The Mercury's could be a setup where communication has certain kinds of breakdowns every once in a while. So the
Hmm.
sun sign connection is like, again, like this much
Yeah.
of what astrology will say about how two people might relate.
Hmm.
So it's like, I don't care what your sun signs are if you want to date somebody and figure out if it's
Yeah.
compatible. I'm going to look at the moon for intimacy, Mars for your sex life, Venus for emotional regulation, and Mercury for communication.
Interesting. Another thing where I get lost, and I also have a lack of understanding that to me confuses me, is that when you talk about astrology, planets get talked about a lot, like you mentioned, in Mars, Venus, and all these planets. And it's always confused me what the planet's relationship to humans or individuals have to do. I'm like, you're talking about a whole nother planet that we don't even live in. And I'm like,
But
how
I'm
does this
telling you, it's not a whole other planet. It's not separate from us. So it's interesting, Ike.
Yeah.
You get this completely in the world of three-dimensional form, where you know that no matter what people sort of define as their access to the divine, as I'm right, you're wrong,
Yeah.
but that really we're all one. And there's
Yes.
only one divine, and all roads lead to it.
Yeah.
That's no different than what I'm saying about the planets, that we are one with them.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you keep coming back to, well, it's separate, it's out there. But you and I are not separate. We are one. We are different
Yeah.
aspects of the one, but we are one. And we
Hmm.
are one with all of the planets. And as they move, there are archetypal interpretations placed on the angles, the planets themselves. And
Mm.
we've got thousands of years of testing
Yeah.
this. This is how it works. So back in Austria, then Mesopotamia, then Greece, then Rome, then Europe.
Yeah.
We have 5,000 years of people looking up and saying, well, every time that red dot comes in, we go to war. And suddenly Mars and war are related to each other. And then 500 years later, there's like dozens more of those experiences.
Yeah.
That's called testing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
astrology has been tested over thousands of years
Oh,
so that the movement and the interpretations we put into them have some truth and veracity.
that's interesting. I've never heard of astrology being put in that context, because every time we talk about astrology, it's always like some type of conclusive fact. It's never in the context of, oh, like, it's being tested. But one thing you said that you nailed, and for me personally, I think speaks to my overall skepticism of astrology, is when we talk about psychedelics and dreams. I personally have experienced this, and I understand the
Right.
power because it's part of my experience. I've never, like, I don't, there's no type of intuitive experience that can come within for to me actually to validate the truth of
Absolutely.
astrology. You know?
You don't have the experience yet.
Yeah, yeah, no.
But the way in which you can understand oneness here is the same principle, to just extend a
Yeah.
little bit further the rational mind that says, oh, it can't be.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
remember, that part of you that's saying no is not the full you. It's not even really you. It's the narrator.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing that I about astrology that I did always find fascinating was that a lot of older cultures like Egyptians seem to have used it to their advantage and used it really well. And a lot of people have used it to like predict wars and whatnot. And a lot of other cultures valued it, and that I don't know much about, but I'm willing to learn and I'm curious
Listen,
about it,
sweetheart, there are people in the United States who
Yeah,
have valued astrology,
yeah,
like Katie Rockefeller, who
yeah.
said millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. Not that I'm a fan of Ronald Reagan, because he sort of ruined the economy of the United States by deregulating everything and
Yeah.
making it impossible to transfer all the wealth up. But he consulted an astrologer in the White House for 8 years.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah.
And what the public was like, oh, how weird. But like, I knew that they were meeting with their astrologer for fucking everything. Because you don't do that unless you're doing it.
I'm curious with the Ronald Reagan thing. Was he keeping that private, or like did the whole world?
No, it was known about enough to be like gossip in the media.
Oh, that's interesting. How did the world receive that? Because
they did not like it.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like that. Doesn't
you understand? Like Ronald Reagan doing that is no different than kings of old and queens of old using astrology to predict war and enemies and all that other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's been done for thousands of years, and so for me, who am I to just completely dismiss that? And I'm sure there's some utility. I also think for me, it's a mixture of skepticism and honestly just a lack of understanding, because I think my understanding has been conflated by so many different outlets that I don't really understand it, and I've never had the experience for myself to really validate it.
Ike, the fact that you even know that there's a thing called sun sign that changes every 4 weeks, and that everyone has a birthday that relates to their sun sign, that because of the newspaper industry.
Yeah.
Not because of astrology.
Yeah.
See, it's made up. What happened is, in the 30s, Princess Margaret was born, and an astrologer in the press predicted that she would have a very invasive life event in her childhood. And then her uncle abdicated the throne, her father became king, and it changed her life incredibly. So the newspapers were like, wait, how can we take advantage of this? So it was a newspaper that first said, well, everybody has a sun sign based on their birth date, which means we can create that will be absolute based on the birth date. And then we can write horoscopes about your sun sign. But you understand, this isn't astrology, this is entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's what you know of astrology, is that the newspaper industry decided to sell more papers by adding something they made up that is no different than the comic section that got made up by comic artists. So that's part of why it's very difficult for some people to push past the meaning of astrology, because the first introduction is this bullshit that says, well, Capricorn's going to feature well in your day. Play the lottery, because everyone's winning.
And at least one thing, exactly. Like for me, I've always seemed like I always associate astrology with just a bunch of entertainment and people cloud chasing and trying to make false promises. One thing I do appreciate about you is that I know you make YouTube videos on astrology that are very nuanced and don't get as much views. Now, unfortunately, I do realize that when things are more nuanced and don't get as much views, they tend to be more truthful because they're not sensationalizing things.
That is absolutely true. I have a limited following because I'm not talking about the pop astrology bullshit. And then some people, I'm presenting astrology as clearly as I can, but it's over the head of a lot of people who would need to know more to really understand what I'm writing about. And this is back to the integrity thing. I don't want to be writing bullshit. I want to be writing what excites me. And so, yes, It might be a smaller following, but my business is thriving, so all is
Yeah,
well.
that's all that matters. Yeah,
That's all that
exactly.
matters.
And so you mentioned that astrology is a science that could be tested, that is constantly being tested,
We
which to
would
me
call it
that
a pseudoscience.
it's a pseudoscience that is being tested. That's
Yeah.
actually very interesting to me because I've never heard it in that mind frame. But to me, that kind of gives some more credibility to it. How did these tests work, or like how is it like? How
When
do
I
how do
say testing, I mean it's like one guy looks up and sees Mars when war is coming, and then another guy looks up and sees Mars and war comes, and then another guy
Oh,
looks up and sees Mars and wars comes. That's what I mean by testing. That
yeah.
it's this event gets tested as true, but you've got
Okay.
to multiply that by all of the
How other
planets or
events
all of the
that
different
happen.
sensibilities. Um,
So are there like scientists who are like literally like taking this seriously and
Absolutely. In
studying
fact,
this and really
yes.
like putting truth to it, not just talking
I
it?
heard a guy on some social media platform the
Yeah.
other day say no science has ever validated astrology.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be in the room because I would have given him quite a hard time. I would have pulled my dissertation out,
Yeah.
which is published by an academic publisher on the subject of astrology. And there is loads of research around whether or not astrology is valid scientifically. And guess what? 50-50. Exactly. Half of the literature looked at things that said no variety, no veracity, no truth. And half looked at things that were like, that's true.
Wow.
Astrology is valid.
Wow.
So you can't say that guy saying that he's lying. He
Yeah.
doesn't know. He imagines that there's no truthful science because he's never investigated. He doesn't have a doctorate. He's never done science.
Yeah. 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 And
Right.
I
But
mean,
it's out there. And I literally could walk back and I could list out studies that prove and studies that disprove.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm definitely one of those people who have no understanding. I hate to be the guy who completely dismissed something, but I can't even talk about it like in depth. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we have you on, and I'm glad that you have all the experience. Like, so I'm just curious, like when you're studying astrology, because I don't know much about the art. What does that look like? What are you paying attention to? And what are you like working on? Like, what is it?
So
Yeah,
there are X number of planets and points, right?
yeah,
So it's the 9 planets, the sun, the moon, angles, and nodes. So there are these, I'll just call them the planets.
yeah.
Understand, not all of the things we look at are planets. So there's about 18 of those. Each one has an archetypal meaning.
Mm,
There are 12 signs in the zodiac, meaning that the 360-degree circle is divided up into 12 equal 30-degree pie shapes. And each
yeah.
sign has an archetypal interpretation that adds like a color to the planet's interpretation. Then there are the angles. There are geometrical angles that we work with in astrology. 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180 are the main ones that astrology works with. And each one of those angles has an interpretive meaning.
Mm,
So just like dreams are about having symbols that tell a story, and there's a meaning you could associate with the symbol based on its universality, what most people would think about it, or what it does, or what its use is, or like we spoke about the animals, what the quality of the animal is. Same principle here, only there's a multitude of things to interpret. So the learning of astrology is about rote learning and memorizing in a left brain analytical kind of way all of those meanings, right? You have to know them
mhm,
so well that the intuitive part of you is free to interpret based on the structural part.
mm,
So the first thing you have to learn is all of those fundamental structures and basics and the interpretations that they each contain.
mm.
And so, like, if we were looking at your chart, we wouldn't only be looking at the planets and where they were, but the signs that they are in and how they're interacting with each other that make up aspects of your personality.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this seems like there's so much to be learned about because it seems like astrology has a powerful relationship between you and your personality. It also seems like astrology has a powerful relationship between between astrology and events that occur.
Well,
That
and that's
yeah.
what I'm doing. Like, I'm not doing the astrology of who you are. Like,
Oh,
if you were
okay.
to come to a session, I would not be saying, well, Ike, you're a Gemini sun, so you
Yeah.
talk a lot. Like, that's not how I do. What I do is called transit astrology, which is the energy that you're working with in any given time frame. So, like, if someone came to me for a session, i.e., this morning, I had a
Yeah.
session just before I did this, we would talk about 2024 and what the energy was and what the energy is going to be in the time to come. So, I'll give you an example. I looked at her chart. I've worked with her before, and I saw that right after we worked last, that Uranus is inconjuncting her moon. Well, Uranus has an interpretation of sudden change. The inconjunct 150-degree angle has the interpretation of like leaving or leaving something behind or making an adjustment in a new direction. And the moon is a stand-in for the unconscious, but it also can represent like changes in home, where
Mm,
we live.
mm,
This woman, right after we met last year, got captivated by a longing to move. And she's now getting ready to make that move from one city to another. But you see, I already knew that
mhm.
something was happening that was sudden, that changed. But I'm not magic. I don't know what it is. But if
Mhm.
I say to her, hey, what happened this summer where you might have made some adjustments to how you thought about home? She just started to laugh because she's
Yeah.
like, yes, that was exactly when I was like, I think I need to move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that transit and that life event matches.
Mm.
So my job in a reading is to match the story. I
Mm.
read the energetic story. The client tells me the practical story. And then we sort of meet in the middle where we talk about the recent past and how certain planetary movements reflected certain life events so that we can then talk about the year ahead with some sense of accuracy.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I mean, I love it, and I appreciate you talking about this because it's definitely helping me with some of the prior beliefs I had, and I can definitely tell you a lot more of a credible source because you actually, I feel like most of the ideas I got about astrology are from a very limited perspective from people who are
Yeah.
not even like who don't even study it themselves, and
No, and
they
you're
are
not going to
yeah,
find someone like me
yeah,
unless you're looking
exactly, and
for
I was
someone like
looking for
me.
that,
But
so
like,
I
there I've had experiences when I did my forecast for 2020 at the end
yeah.
of 19. I did my own forecast, but then there's a guy that I guest on his channel, Michael Sandler. He's got a big channel out there. And we were talking about the changes that were coming in 2020. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like you have never seen before on the planet. And he pushed back. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, I have no idea, but I promise you, it's like you have never seen before. And it's going to start in January. We're going to be thrown right into it. And then the whole year ahead is going to be bumpy because of blah, 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 blah. Well,
Yeah.
do you remember 2020?
Yeah.
Well, I knew about 2020 before 2020 happened. And I'd be
Mhm.
on the phone every morning with my pal Monique in January 2020. It was like, oh my God, Australia's on fire. Oh my God, there's a virus in China. Oh my God, there's.
Yeah.
We knew it was coming because Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter all meeting at 22 degrees of Cancer. Each planet, each sign, and each angle, in this case, a conjunction, has meaning. And the
Yeah.
meaning of
Yeah.
that is everything changes structurally on the planet like you've never seen before. And
Yeah.
I promise you, what's coming next in the United States is violence like you've never seen before. So I talked all about that in December and when we might see it. And trust me, the summer's going to be fucking wild. So the movement of the planets don't cause things. That's another challenge to people understanding astrology. They assume that it's causal, that Uranus moves and that causes something to happen, but it's a reflection.
Mhm.
Uranus moves, we move. The movement is the same. Pluto
Mhm.
moves, we move. The movement is the same.
Yeah. Man, this has been very interesting, and and although I don't completely understand everything, I know I appreciate I always love to see the passion in people,
You
and
can see I'm very
you
passionate about
clearly studied this, and I appreciate that, and I really wish I could reflect more on this and have a longer conversation, but unfortunately I do have to
Yeah, it's
end this
time to go.
podcast.
Me
Yeah,
too.
and also yeah, we could talk about this forever. So, but for those who may be interested in connecting with you, Michael, and learning more about astrology, or perhaps talking about dreams, or just connecting with you for whatever reason, how can people do that?
Best place is my website, michaellennox.com. You can find my social media connections on michaellennox.com because I do put out a video
Yeah.
every morning about the day's astrology. I do a dream circle once a month, a very intimate gathering on Zoom on the third Sunday. And there's information about that on the website. I have 4 books about dreams, and that's there as well. So michaellennox.com is the hub.
Well, you heard it. If you're interested in dream interpretation or connecting with Michael for whatever reason, he gave you your information. Mike, I want to thank you for your time
My
and
pleasure.
your presence. And I've really learned a lot about astrology, and I would love to continue this conversation sometime again. And I just want to thank you for being a great source of information. And remember, everyone, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Thank you. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to write me a review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe for more content. I'm on a mission to inspire as many people as I can, and your reviews will help me reach a wider audience. Thank you.